Regeneration for me is a process. It's not kind of an end state. And so part of that process is a mindset shift that is moving from scarcity to abundance mindset. But as far as a process is concerned, one is doing a full history of place. And that is from a 360 degree, looking at the geology, the soil, the archaeology, the anthropology, the spoken word history, working with the community, looking at the flow of energy, water, waste streams, food, just really looking at the entirety of something before you come in. It's not coming in with a preset mindset. But once you kind of create all those layers that I just outlined and put them all on a map, that's the regenerative process. As you create that layering, what should be there unfolds from it.
As you know, I have a very clear mission with Building Green, and I know so many brilliant architects, interior designers, and contractors who do too, but they're still stuck working on projects that drain them with clients who don't value what they bring. That's why we founded Market Your Architecture over a year ago. It's a marketing agency that helps mission-driven designers attract better clients, charge what they are worth, and finally build the kind of portfolio that reflects who they really are. If that sounds like the shift you need, there's a link in the description to marketyourarchitecture.com. And before we jump into the podcast, please rate and subscribe. It really helps me reach more people like you. In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schipp, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. If you're an architecture lover or you love traveling and you've ever scrolled through one of the big architecture magazines, I'm sure you've seen the image of those amazing bamboo tree houses of Playa Viva in Mexico. They're an absolute dream, iconic and completely immersed in nature. Well, our guest today, David Leventhal, is one of the visionaries behind that view. David went from a career in media to co-founding one of the world's most unique eco-hotels. And now his mission goes far beyond just that one location. Through regenerative travel, he's helping create a new model of how tourism can support local communities and restore ecosystems. In this episode, we talk about how to choose the right architect for a project like this, how to decide exactly where to build in a remote area, how to be respectful of nature when you do it, and how 5-star traveling is shifting from room service to connection with nature. Enjoy the episode. Thank you so much, David, for joining me today on Building Green. I'm really excited for this conversation. Before we go into all your projects, how do you usually answer when people ask you what it is that you do?
It depends on who I'm talking to, because, one of the problems I have is when I go places and I say, I have a hotel, it doesn't really say what I do. So I usually let other people say what I do, and they're usually very profusive about how wonderful Playa Viva is and how it's this model, regenerative, sustainable green boutique hotel on the beach in Mexico, and it's the most amazing place. But, in all humility, it's hard for me to talk about it that way. So
tell me the story of how you got there. What's been the path to Playa Viva and regenerative travel for you?
Well, Playa Viva, I say, I'm exactly where I need to be right now. And it's a culmination of everything that I've done before that. So, I didn't go to hospitality school at Cornell or in Switzerland or anything. My education in hospitality really came from working as a busboy, working as a waiter to pay for my college education. And never really worked in hotels, but I've been to plenty of them. And my background really was more in marketing, sales, business development, in media and technology. And Sandra Khan, my ex-wife, she really got me into becoming an environmentalist through her mother, who is a big environmentalist in Mexico right now, working on Sin Maíz No Hay País, which is the whole program to keep genetically modified corn out of Mexico. And through her, we met a biologist named Gerardo Ceballos, who was doing a sabbatical with Paul Ehrlich, who is at Stanford, and wrote The Population Bomb. And that really became kind of our entry into conservation. And we, Sandra and I, led a big project called Amigos de Calakmul, Friends of Calakmul, eventually Rainforest Reef, to help form a conservation easement so that peasant farmers could retain ownership of the land that they were on and pass the flora and fauna into protection. And this is a big jaguar habitat as an umbrella species. And then from there, through a guy named Sean Paul with Ecologics, really understood that even if you put a fence around an area and said, we're protecting it, you're really not protecting it if you don't deal with the people problems, because the people will continue to go in and illegally log and hunt jaguar pelts and do all kinds of things like that. So you need to work on the people problems too. So my journey really evolved from conservationist or environmentalist to what I call a social environmentalist as well, and seeing that as two sides of the coin there. And then when Sandra purchased the land that's Playa Viva and went off to Greenville to hire Bill Reed, which was a genius move. Bill Reed was the founder of Regenerative and really came out of the green build movement, that being LEED certified platinum really didn't even get you to carbon neutral. So we were just destroying the planet at a slower level. And Bill came in with this whole concept of working in a regenerative way. And so that's when that evolution continued on to being more of a regenerative mindset, looking at things from a whole systems perspective, and evolved into the work that I'm doing today. So that's really been the journey in a nutshell, although that was kind of long.
I love it. Super, super deep. And it makes a lot of sense how you got where you are today. You mentioned the land, the piece of land before very quickly. And how did you choose the exact place on Earth for the project?
When guests ask me that question, how did you end up here? I tell them, you want to hear the short answer or the long answer? And the short answer is the land found us. This was a location that has an archaeological site that are agricultural terraces. So this is, back to what Elena Khan, my ex-mother-in-law, does, is working with peasant farmers, keeping them using traditional farming techniques. There were shamans there, so there's a whole wellness component to it as well. And it's really, part of what regeneration teaches you is to understand the history of place, how that place got degraded, because in most cases, humans are degrading the places that we're building upon, and then understanding our role in bringing back the abundance that was once there. And so it's through that understanding of history of place, of realizing, hey, the land kind of picked us to bring back the abundance that was there. This is a place that was a beautiful coastal forest that had thriving community on it, that had a wellness component to it. And we're really only the stewards of this land for a short period of time.
And some people might say that since it's such a remote place, or might ask, do we even need to build there? What is your answer to that?
I think inherent in that question are two things. What do we do with remote places, and where is the right place to build? So, to the extent that this land had been a low coastal forest, but had been degraded through slash and burn agriculture, we're rebuilding, restoring, and regenerating the landscape, not just in planting 10,000 trees, but working in key line water. And we're working all the way upstream in a whole watershed regeneration project, and working on the well-being of the entire community upstream as well as downstream. As far as a resort location, when you get to Playa Viva and you walk out to the beach, and we're only 40 minutes from the airport, but you walk out and you look left and you look right and you see nothing but nature as far as the eye can see. It's a beautiful place to be. So I think that inherent in that question is, what's the role of a regenerative development in bringing back the abundance? And that can happen in a remote area, in a suburban area, in an urban area. there are many opportunities for us to regenerate.
And I also like the aspect of bringing nature, like the most natural nature, close to people, because so many people, when they travel, they just travel to cities or places like Miami Beach or Tulum that are maybe a bit overdeveloped. And that's the only nature you then know. So I think in order to increase our awareness of what happens with the planet, it's important to be close to nature.
Yeah, we have a saying, which is immersion in the luxury of nature. And to consider what it does to you to really be immersed totally in nature, to not have the sound of an air conditioner, to not have the sound of a refrigerator humming in the background. When you get into a room at a hotel room, think about all the kind of man-made pollution that's hitting you, from the light on the smoke detector to that engine humming in the background of that refrigerator and the mini bar that's there. And when you strip all that away and you go into a room in Playa Viva, and in many cases it's going to be a room with no doors and no windows and no locks. It's really immersion in luxury of nature. I mean, you're in a beautiful building, but it's integrated into nature. And that process of having the sounds of nature, the ocean in the background, really brings people down and relaxes them. And this is a thing that came about from some guests of ours that were like, we've been here for a while and we've noticed that it takes a day or two for people, for like the Playa Valium to really kick in. And yeah, you do notice it. People relax in a much more profound way in a place like Playa Viva.
I can imagine. And I recently heard a podcast episode from Stephen Bartlett. He's one of the biggest podcasters that I listen to. And he speaks to a lot of successful people. And they all say that regenerative traveling is the new luxury. Like when you have everything you have, all the money you can, the only thing you want is like connect to nature and holidays so you can really re-energize.
There's so much to unpack in that statement, because one of them is regeneration only luxury? And I think the answer to that for me is no. That regenerative travel really at its core is reciprocity, being a good guest and being a good host. And we're travelers from the moment we leave our door, whether we're going next door to our neighbor, whether we're going to the neighboring state, whether we're going to the neighboring country, or we're going to the neighboring continent. There's a quote by Anthony Bourdain, which is, travel isn't reward for working, it's experience for living. And I think what you're getting at is the core of regenerative travel is having authentic experiences. And I think at the core of what that podcaster was getting to is so many people that I talk to, even those that travel at the luxury level, start to say, if I go to a Four Seasons, it's a Four Seasons wherever I go. And I don't want to pick on Four Seasons. It could be any luxury brand. That at a certain point, by making the experience so reliable, they've made it a commodity. And people want to go someplace to experience that place. And we experience that place through people, and we experience that place through the natural beauty and environment that it is. So yes, the new luxury is a luxury that comes in an immersive experience about a unique place that you can really share those experiences with the people of that place and come back and have stories to tell.
Let's talk about choosing the right architect for such a project. What made the architect for Playa Viva the right one?
Well, I think it's evolved over time, like so many things. I mean, the first architect you choose is the one that you trust, the one that you've potentially worked with in the past or seen the work that they've done and work with them. What happened to me is I went to a session through an organization I'm part of called Social Venture Network, which is part of my evolution as a social impact entrepreneur. And this was a session given by Google on our unconscious bias. And as I looked at our architect, I'm a balding, white, what I'll call buju, spiritual, but Jewish background, male. And sure enough, that was exactly, he had more hair than I did, but that's what our architect was. And I realized that, just like in nature thrives on diversity, uh, a more resilient system, and that it would be incumbent upon us to begin to look at how do we bring in other ideas. And that is what I spoke at a conference, a boutique hotel conference, and asked the editor of the magazine if she could recommend at least women to me to begin to look at. And I was presented with a variety, a white woman, an African American woman, and a Latina. And they all presented the boards, concept boards, because we were looking at doing a treehouse at this time, because that was our original concept way back when. And now we finally figured out how to transplant the trees to do the tree houses on the beach. And while they were all the same, Kimshasa Baldwin, who had worked with us, I had worked with somebody that I was tracking. I knew that she could work in a remote area, that there's something about being in our, remote location with solar power, et cetera. So I asked Kimshasa to be our new architect. She came in and she designed what's become our iconic treehouse, the one that was on the cover of Travel and Leisure magazine. And for travel, it's really good to have something that iconic because everybody wants to take a picture in it. It goes up on social media and everybody else is like, oh my God, where is that? I want to go there. And so by going outside of my unconscious or realizing what my unconscious bias was and going outside of it is exactly what led to that. And since Kimshasa, we've continued to work with her. She designed the expansion of our common area. We had another group from Rotterdam called Nomadic Resorts design our Manta Treehouse Village and our Tortuga Yoga Shala. And now recently been working with Andrea, who designed our Infinity Casita. So we're constantly looking for new talent who want to work in a regenerative way and who we can collaborate with and really begin to create diversity while still having that architectural conversation so that everything is Playa Viva, but still has complexity to it that makes it beautiful.
It's beautiful. What does it actually mean to work in a regenerative way? You've mentioned it a few times now.
Yeah, well, this came about through our relationship with Bill Reed and Regenesis Group. And as mentioned, regeneration for me is a process. It's not kind of an end state. And so part of that process is a mindset shift that is moving from scarcity to abundance mindset. But as far as a process is concerned, and this is something that, as I do new projects, begin to implement them. One is doing a full history of place. And that is from a 360 degree, looking at the geology, the soil, the archaeology, the anthropology, the spoken word history, working with the community, looking at the flow of energy, water, waste streams, food, just really looking at the entirety of something before you come in. It's not coming in with a preset mindset. But once you kind of create all those layers that I just outlined and put them all on a map, like that little game you used to play as a kid, like give me a number, give me a color, and it would unfold, and then you'd kind of have the answer. That's the regenerative process. As you create that layering, what should be there unfolds from it. And there's a development going down the block from us or down the beach from us. And Jason is using the Regenesis for this. And he was like, well, do you have any advice for me? I was like, the advice is trust the process. So there are other things that go into it. One of them is creating a set of core values and or what are called core principles from a regenerative perspective. And those principles then guide the decision making. It's very similar to a coming up with a mission statement for a company, but it's something that is more kind of core and as you get to places where you have issues related to design, that core principle can say, no, you actually, this is where the core principle tells you that design should go, not this way. And I've given examples of that.
I think that's very, very useful. What are your core principles?
At Playa Viva, there were 7. They got consolidated down to 5. The first one, it has to do with energy, water, and waste streams being more green, sustainable, regenerative, transparent, how we manage all that. The last one is creating a living legacy. So really looking 7 generations down, the impact we're going to have long-term in what we do and how we do it. The other one is promoting biodiversity. A lot of that came out of our core values around the jaguar habitat and preserving nature and working with nature and restoring nature. But 2 that I think really crystallize what makes Playa Viva different are promoting transformational experiences and creating meaningful community. And so an example would be a decision about having kitchens in each room, which was like, well, that's not going to meet our need for energy. And then it was, well, what about having a refrigerator? And, then people are going to eat there and they're not going to come to the common area and want common meals. And is that going to really, work on energy? And is that going to promote transformational experience? Is that going to create meaningful community? No. And it was a tough battle because, some of the women who had children were like, no, I want to be able to have food there to feed my kid and have milk. And, we were like, well, push comes to shove, we can get you a cooler full of ice to have that milk for that kid. But, how does that create meaningful community? And so that's how having core principles or the principles can lead to helping you make decisions about design.
That's very cool. Beautiful principles. What do you think about slow money or slow investments? Because obviously you've talked about the developer next door or down the beach. What does it look like to choose purpose over profit? Or does that even happen?
Well, yeah. I mean, in the question you asked, the way you asked it was, it's either or. And I think the real question is can you do well and do good at the same time? And I think the answer is definitely yes. I mean, you look at organizations from, Patagonia as an example that does very well and does a lot of good at the same time. And so, a lot of this goes down to the work that we do as a B Corp. Playa Viva is certified as a B Corp. We're in the process of getting recertified as a B Corp. B Corp is constantly changing and moving the goalposts so that you have to get better and better at what you do. So we don't see it necessarily as a compromise like that. And part of it for us too is, I remember talking to a guy who ran kind of private investments, and he asked me, well, who manages your money? And I was like, well, I put it in impact investing. He was like, you're compromising your returns. Put your money with me. I'll make you even more money. And then you can spend all the money you want on like all the philanthropy. And I kind of turned to him and I said, wait a minute, you're a market guy. How efficient is it for the market to rape, pillage, and plunder only to then repair the damages of rape, pillage, and plunder? What if you just invest in not rape, pillaging, and plundering? Then you don't have to reinvest in all of that, undoing all the negativity you did. He didn't have an answer for me, but that really, to me, is the core of what we do is, and that's part of moving from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset as well. How can we look at bringing more to everybody rather than keep a little bit to ourselves and then pay a little bit to kind of make things better? And, so much of the ills that we're dealing with now are a result of the type of thinking that is going to be short-termism. A lot of the kind of work that I'd like to be doing is around how do we move into conscious capitalism? How do we share stories about people who are doing, and companies, not just people, who are doing well and doing good at the same time?
And what's the hardest truth or something you've learned about running a hotel responsibly that people don't see from the outside?
Well, I think the hard truths about running a hotel are the hard truths of running a hotel anywhere. running any business responsibly is about working with the people in the community and changing habits, right? But once they do, it's amazing. I mean, we just did a 15th anniversary where we interviewed some of the different people from our team. And I was lucky to interview our assistant manager, Sulema, and I asked Sulema about how working at Playa Viva has impacted her. And, she talked about how she was born and grew up in this town of Huluchuca that's 3 kilometers from Playa Viva, and a lot of our employees come from. And, it used to be that they, if they ate a tamale, they would just throw the corn husk on the ground, the pig would come around and eat it. But now with all the plastic and the bottles and everything, there's just garbage. There was garbage all over. But through implementing through the town and some of the other folks in the town, a Huluchuca Limpia program, a cleaning Huluchuca, all that plastic is going into bins, and they're developing habits around collecting the garbage and not just throwing it on the ground. And then she was telling me a story about how she was in the car with her daughter, and they're driving down the road, and the daughter's drinking a soft drink, whatever. She finishes it and throws it out the window, right? And she pulls the car over to the side of the road, and she tells, you can't do that, and it's not by the makes the daughter get out, get the bottle, come back. Anyway, they're driving down the road. She's telling me a story. They're driving down the road, I don't know, a month later. Sulema's eating a banana, rolls down the window, and throws the banana peel out the window, and the daughter just jumps on her. Okay. And she had to explain to the daughter, okay, it's a banana, it's biodegradable, it's different than a bottle. But the fact that she shared that story, the pride that she had in how she changed her habits, her mentality. So, when we're asked what are the hardest things about running, not just a hotel, but running a business like we run, a lot of it's around changing mentality and changing the way people think and do what they do. And so to see that type of change, that's really the most rewarding thing about what we do.
I agree. It's even for me, I don't do big projects. I just have the podcast where I talk about big projects. And when people from my team come to me that help me with the editing or with the publishing of the podcast, and they come to me and they say, hey, I've started being more sustainable at home. I heard something on a podcast and I'm starting to do it. And they are not specially interested in architecture or in sustainability, but just by being confronted with it in their daily lives, that makes them change their habits. That makes me very happy as well.
Yeah, it's super rewarding.
So what would you recommend a developer or founder? You have a business background, a founder or developer that wants to build a business that's regenerative?
Well, first of all, trust the process. Second, hire people that have done this before, and commit to it, because the outcome is going to be better. It's going to differentiate you. It's going to, you're not going to be another Me Too project. You're not going to be another box hotel out there. And that it's rewarding, and know that it is a process and it's constant, that you need to continue to keep working at it. Because, so many folks, if they're going to build a building to make it as cheap as they can so they can flip it and turn it over and hand it over to somebody, usually when they do it that way, they're leaving the person who bought that building with a lot of problems. That's then going to cost them more money in the long term to fix, because it wasn't designed with sun studies in mind, so that you can look at the effects of the sun, shade, heat, and airflow, or things like that are going to be just basic information for somebody who's looking at doing something in a regenerative way. And so it's going to reduce the operating costs of the place, but it's also going to create a place that people want to go to and be in. And so you're going to generate more long-term benefits by undertaking a process that may take a little bit more investment from the get-go.
Just a quick reality check. If you're constantly over-delivering, working around the clock, and still chasing the right kind of projects, you're not alone. I keep meeting architects, interior designers, and contractors in that exact cycle, which is actually why we started Market Your Architecture. We help you reposition your work and get in front of more of the right people so you can finally choose who you want to work with. If that sounds interesting to you and you want to know more about us, you'll find the link to marketyourarchitecture.com in the description. You're also involved in water generative nonprofit work. What's the story behind that?
Yes, it's a watershed regeneration project. It's called Recimar, which is regenerating from Sierra to Mar, from the mountains to the ocean. And that really came about from a couple of events. One is when we were working with Bill Reed early on, you have to cross a river or waterway as you enter Playa Viva. That's part of the estuary that backs up. And the estuary or lagoon is a geological feature that's marked throughout the Pacific coast of Mexico. The rivers come down. During rainy season, they'll break through the sandbar and empty out. But then, as that sandbar builds out, the ocean recedes, it'll just back up and create these lagoons with mangroves. And so what Bill said is, Playa Viva, by having this waterway run through our property and border our property, we inherit whatever happens up that watershed. If that watershed is full of pesticides and full of garbage and unhealthy, then Playa Viva is full of pesticides and full of garbage and unhealthy. And so we have an upstream responsibility that goes beyond our borders. That project also happened because of a relationship with a group called Legacy Works, which I'm happen to be on the board of now. But we brought them in originally to look at fisheries. We had an intern tell us that the fish that were caught locally were not sustainable. It turns out they were sustainably caught, but that a huachinango, a red snapper that's less than 30 centimeters, is really not an adult yet and hasn't reproduced. And so we're basically eating the babies when we're eating a plate-sized red snapper. So it was really more about our kitchen only buying and committing to buy and serve up large red snapper. But in bringing that group in, we went up the watershed to go to the Gutierrez farm, which is one of the more popular excursions at Playa Viva. And it was kind of around COVID. And so we were stopping along the way because we have a educational program where we help kids who may drop out of school after elementary school have enough funds to get down to where the junior high and high school is. And this group, Legacy Works, said, you guys have built some amazing relationships in the watershed. Usually when we work in the community, it takes us 5 or 10 years to build the level of relationships that you built up in a couple of years. And you should really think about working at a watershed level. And we were like, well, if we're going to do that, it's got to be at a regenerative basis. So because of that, we started this organization called Recimar, which became the umbrella for all the social impact we were already doing with the turtle sanctuary in education, and really had a focus on working in a regenerative way in the entire watershed.
That's super interesting. And what's your big mission there or next goal?
Well, I think from a big mission standpoint, it's to create well-being and resiliency in the watershed. And it's interesting because, this is something that the World Bank is interested in. This is something that insurance companies are interested in because now they're dealing with, if there are big weather events, hurricanes in the coast, watersheds, if they're resilient, they can withstand that and not as much damage. And if they're not resilient, then they can create a lot more damage. So what we're doing with Recimar has become a model for how you can work at a watershed level with education, with marine life, with permaculture, with farmers, with ranchers, with producers, work in restoring damaged areas, and work really at a whole system level to create that resiliency and well-being. So there are a bunch of projects that are being instituted in that. An example of a newest one is the Citizen Scientist program, in which we're working with students and their teachers and the parents to really study the health of the water, both quality and quantity, and doing that at a high kind of water season and low water season. and begin to understand what's going into that river and causing it to be healthy or unhealthy, and the downstream or upstream effects that can have on creating a healthier and more resilient watershed.
And if we're going back into traveling, if I'm someone who loves to travel and care deeply about the planet, what do I need to unlearn first?
I think two things come to mind there. One is I grew up in the South, and they had a saying, which is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so travel can have a positive impact on the places that you travel to. And I've seen a lot of flight shaming around how can you call it green or sustainable or regenerative travel if the first thing you do is you get on a plane and burn fossil fuels to get there. So I've spoken significantly about that around how if you look at something like Project Drawdown, air travel is number 70 something on the list, whereas there's so many other things that you could do around travel. So really, I would say unlearning, it's more about learning and being open to understand the impact that your travel has on the places that you're going. And core to me in regeneration and regenerative travel is around reciprocity and having that one-to-one relationship with the people and the place that you're going to. That there's a saying that I quote now from Anthony Bourdain, which is travel isn't reward for working, it's experience for living. And so if that could be the driving force behind how you decide to travel, yes.
It has a lot to do with respect towards the planet and the location, but also towards the people that are there and how they are interacting with the planet in their daily habits.
Yeah. One of the kind of graphics I like to try to explain about regeneration and that paradigm shift is, there's this triangle which has humans at the top, and then it has kind of mammals, and then, and there's a hierarchy to nature. And there's another drawing which takes everything that's in that triangle and then just puts it into a circle. And the idea is, we as humans, have a special role in nature, but we're part of nature. And so, our role really is as stewards and caretakers of it, but not to have dominion over it and to extract it and to destroy it. There is no planet B. And, the Earth, we need Earth. The Earth doesn't need us. And she can go on for, way longer without us. So we really need to learn how to live within it. But, and we're tourists from the moment we leave our door, whether we're going to the grocery store or a friend's house or to the neighboring state. So however we travel, we really need to learn how to live within those principles.
And how relevant do you think certifications like B Corp are for travelers?
Well, certifications make it easy for you to evaluate whether the place is meeting a certain criteria that you like or not. The question is which one of these certifications are worthwhile? For the longest time, we really didn't find many that we liked. I would go into a hotel that I won't name, and I would walk in and the air conditioner would be set at 17, and there would be condensation on the windows, and right underneath the air conditioner would be a little tent saying we're blah, blah, blah certified. And it's like, no, I don't want to be certified by that if that's what you're allowing to happen. And so, it was really left up to guests to look at what the hotels were doing and or travel locations to talk about what their processes were. So things like B Corp, I think, make a big difference. I work with Regenerative Travel. I'm on the board of Regenerative Travel, and Regenerative Travel is really working on how do we help hotels push out more information to be transparent about what they're doing right. And again, regeneration is a process, just like B Corp is constantly moving the goalposts. Regeneration is asking you to constantly improve what you're doing and how you're doing what you're doing. None of us are perfect. And this is not about being perfect. This is about becoming more aware of the negative impacts of some of the decisions that you're making and what you need to do to have a positive impact.
And what made you decide, what requirements made you decide to go for the B Corp certification instead of any other one?
I think because I respected many of the businesses that I saw had B Corp certification and felt that we needed a certification. I liked the transparency of it. You can go to B Corp's website. You can search Playa Viva. You can see our report, and it covers 5 areas. And it goes into detail about each one of those areas and our score and what we did and how we did it. And then having gone through the process, I mean, it took us about a year to get the entire certification done. I respect it now and respect, well, I didn't, not that I didn't respect it before, but I respect it more now having gone through it. And so, yes, I do recommend the B Corp certification.
And you mentioned before your first principle was being transparent in water, electricity, and something else?
Water, energy, and waste stream. I mean, I think if you're looking at any green, sustainable business, the first thing they really need to look at is water, energy, and waste, right? I mean, you look at Marriott, right? What are they looking at? They're looking at how are we putting light switches that automatically turn off, or in hotels, where when you leave the room, the light switches go off. You're looking at water. Yeah, it's good to not use your towel and to hang up your towel. And it's good if the hotel actually does that you hang up your towel rather than throw it on the floor and they wash it, that they actually don't just take it and wash it, saving water. And then, waste streams, it's, okay, are you recycling? Are you composting? Are you eliminating plastics coming in? Are you eliminating plastics going out? Why do I have to have a plastic straw in every one of my drinks? Why are you making me a to-go cup? That's plastic that I have to take with. There's so many things that are potentially maybe slight changes to the customer, but big changes for the planet.
And in what way are you sending reports out to guests, through repeated guests, or is this information public?
Well, B Corp is public. And, in many ways, we don't hit our customers over the head with our green stuff. For those who are interested in it, we share it. I mean, if you want to come see get a tour of our back of house and see our water treatment systems and see our solar plant, we're happy to share that with you. We invite you to come out and see our garden. We invite you to see the farm and to see how we're composting and the pigs are turning what you don't eat into deliciousness for them, and how that then completes the cycle. So it's not, we do publish an impact report, which we make available to our guests, either through our website, on our impact page, or at the hotel itself. But it's, again, we don't want the sustainability and regeneration to be the lead. It's the experience. It's a luxury that comes from that experience, and the luxury that comes from the experience that it's also green, that should all work together. I mean, one of the things we say is all the luxury, none of the guilt. So, for example, you take a hot shower, you're not burning carbon for it. It's being heated by the sun. So take a nice hot long shower. That water is going to be recycled and put back into the system to water the plants, to feed the flowers that go there. But at the same time, be conscious that you're using a lot of water. So if you can take a 2-minute shower, take a 2-minute shower, please.
I think you've done a really, really good job at selling sustainability. I know you have a marketing and sales expertise or background. And to me, I'm working really hard on sharing that mission or that opinion that sustainability doesn't have to be ugly or self-made, that we can have sustainability as something. I want to turn sustainability into something cool, because the cooler it is, the more desirable and more people want to do it. What advice would you give me? Well,
I don't think you're going to make sustainability cool. I think sustainability is cool. Okay. I think there's a whole generation that's coming around that realizes that my generation, the generation above me, et cetera, we fucked it up. We've polluted, we've raped, pillaged, and plundered. We've it's, there's a cartoon that I saw the other day, and I wish I could find it to share it with you, but it was this old man kind of leaning towards a young kid, and both of them have these like glass helmets on and backpacks with tubes going in, and the background is just this desolate, burned out forest, just there's nothing left. And the dad's got this briefcase, or dad, grandpa, whatever, it's got a briefcase. Says, son, look what I've left for you. And he's handing him this briefcase of money. And, you just see the background. You're just like, really? And so I think, this next generation that's growing up with active shooters, that's growing up with a sense that of the climate crisis that we're in. This stuff, it's not about being cool. It is the way to do things. And if you're not, you're uncool, right? And so, one of the things I heard recently at a conference, this was a CEO at a hospitality company, talk about that this generation, this new generation coming out of school, of the best and the brightest and the talented, they want to work for causes. They don't want to work for companies. Now, if the company's got a cause, then they'll work for that company, right? So it's not hard for Playa Viva to attract top talent. It's not hard for Patagonia. And I don't want to put myself in the same place as them, but you get the point. But the CEO is like, we're in hospitality. Hospitality is a service business that relies on people, and it relies on the best and the brightest people. And if those people don't want to work for us, in the long run, we're a dinosaur. And so we need to do this. We need to have experiential, regenerative. We need to add this to the type of product that we're offering. Because if we don't, nobody's going to come work for us, not the top people. So, you don't have to make regeneration cool. You don't have to make sustainability cool. It is. And if the people who aren't doing it think they're cool because they're, being extractive, then I don't want to have anything to do with them. They are uncool.
I love this. That's a great ending. But before we wrap up, I have one last question. What's your next goal with regenerative travel? Is Playa Viva for just the first location? Are there going to be more?
I think there are two questions there. For Playa Viva itself, we've been constantly expanding it. I mean, it started out with 5 rooms and 12 rooms and 19 rooms. We just built our 20th room with air conditioning as a model home for building a whole residence community. I shouldn't call it residence because it's still going to have the whole community aspect of what we do. So, Playa Viva is expanding. But from a regenerative travel standpoint, one of the things I love doing is going to visit other hotels who are doing the kinds of things that Playa Viva does. And there's so many great projects that are, sourcing locally, that are, farm to table, that are wellness based, that hire locally, that are paying people good salary, all those things. And they need to get this message out. They need to be part of a larger network, and they need to support each other and support that travel community. So I'm on the board of Regenerative Travel. Amanda Ho is the executive director of that, and my role really is to support her in expanding the impact that regenerative travel has as an organization beyond, the Playa Viva and the 30, 40 hotels that we have in the network.
I highly recommend you to watch episode 30 of Building Green with Graham Labe. He's the co-founder of the architecture firm Luxury Frontiers, and they focus on luxury remote hospitality.
I'm familiar with Luxury Frontiers. I was just at a conference, Eco Resort Network conference, and one of their principals was supposed to be there, but had a health issue. And so somebody else was there from their organization. I think they do some good work. I'm continuing to work with the Regenesis and Bill Reed and the work that they do, which I think is really good. And I am looking at a project in Cabo right now, and I'm constantly looking at projects. Somebody has been trying to get me to get into Bacalar in Mexico as well. And so looking at other places in Mexico, and finding partners who are interested in working in this way. So yes, I definitely will check that out, and always looking for recommendations of folks who are doing things similarly. So thank you.
Yeah, very cool. So David, if people want to follow your work, see what you do, where can they find you?
For Playa Viva, playaviva.com, PLAYAVIVA.com. We've got a bunch of, we have an Instagram presence. We're have a lot of wonderful, like short little films on YouTube, which I definitely recommend, especially from an architectural standpoint. One on the inspiration behind the manta ray village and the bamboo work that was done on that particular project, I think is really interesting. Regenerativetravel.com is its own website and the work there. And you're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, David Leventhal. I think I'm Leventhal D might be my LinkedIn handle.
Okay, I'll definitely share those in the project description. Thank you so much, David. It's been a very interesting conversation about traveling and the purpose of life of building businesses. Thank you so much.
Valentina, thank you. Thank you for your interest, and thanks for doing this podcast.
A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at LatinaShip. Thanks.